My name is Brian Hoyland, and I've lived a life most would call ordinary, yet it brought me face to face with the extraordinary. I was a military police officer in the U.S. Army, proud to serve my country. But life has a way of dealing unexpected hands. During my service, I was exposed to toxic chemicals, an invisible enemy I didn't even know I was fighting. Years later, those chemicals began wreaking havoc on my body, leading to devastating autoimmune diseases. One of them, the most insidious, targeted my heart. It wasn't just a condition, it was a thief, stealing the very thing that kept me alive. The damage was slow at first. Doctors monitored me, adjusted medications, and assured me we'd keep it under control. But by the time it was clear this wasn't a battle I could win, my heart had been eaten away from the inside. The disease destroyed it, leaving me dependent on machines, medications, and ultimately a heart transplant. But nothing could prepare me for January 16th, 2017, the day I died. That morning, I was admitted to the ER, struggling against life-threatening arrhythmias. For 7 hours, doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, trying to stabilize me. Each time the arrhythmias struck, I felt like my body was slipping further away from me. It's strange how, in those moments, you're simultaneously consumed with fear and filled with clarity. My mind raced with thoughts of my family, my failures, and the countless things I wished I'd done differently. Finally, they moved me to an ICU bed. I heard the team discussing intubation and preparing the ICU protocols. That's when it hit again, another brutal arrhythmia, worse than the last. The alarms blared. The crash cart arrived. I could hear the urgency in their voices, but the sound seemed to fade. My body felt heavy, cold, distant. I knew I was dying. As panic threatened to take hold, something shifted. Amid the chaos, I began to pray, not a polished, rehearsed prayer, but a raw, desperate plea. I confessed my sins, all the wrongs I could remember. A deep sense of comfort washed over me, silencing my fears. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. I whispered, "Lord, I'm coming home." The moment my heart stopped, I felt it, like slipping out of a heavy coat. My body was no longer a cage. I was free. What came next was nothing like I expected. No bright tunnel, no immediate judgment. Instead, I was surrounded by silence, enveloped in a dark, endless void. At first, the void was comforting, peaceful even. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. A profound love and calmness radiated through me. But then, something unsettling began to stir. The peace felt counterfeit, like a predator mimicking safety to lure its prey. And far in the distance, there was light, a light so pure it called to my soul. Without hesitation, I turned toward it. I didn't walk. I didn't run. I just moved. Something within me knew I had to get there. Little did I know, the real journey was only beginning. The light grew stronger with every moment. It wasn't just a glow. It was alive, vibrant, and pulsating with something indescribable. I couldn't measure the distance between me and it, yet I felt as if I was traveling at the speed of thought. There was no resistance, no sense of movement, just the absolute certainty that I was being drawn closer with every heartbeat, or whatever the equivalent of a heartbeat was in this place. As I approached, the dark void seemed to pull at me, as if it didn't want to let me go. The peace and love it had offered moments before felt hollow, like a mask that had slipped. But the light, it was the opposite. It was pure, untainted, and overflowing with love so profound it was overwhelming. Every part of me, even the parts one didn't know existed, was being filled with this love. And then I stood before it. The light was endless, immeasurable. It was as if I could see forever, and yet I was consumed by its brilliance. What struck me was that, despite its intensity, it didn't hurt my eyes. I could stare into it without flinching, and it revealed things I couldn't comprehend, layers of truth, wisdom, and understanding that seemed to unfold within me like an eternal blossom. Then I heard a voice, not a sound, but a presence that reverberated through my very being. It wasn't harsh or commanding. It was gentle, yet it carried a weight that could silence galaxies. "Come closer," the voice said. I didn't hesitate. The instant I thought of moving, I was there, stepping into the light. It engulfed me completely, not like walking into a room, but as if I was being absorbed into its essence. And with it came an explosion of knowledge. I suddenly understood things I had never grasped before, truths about the universe, about life and death, about love and eternity. But the strange thing is, I can't recall most of it now. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The moment you're back in this world, it slips away. One thing I can never forget, though, is the love. God's love wasn't just an emotion. It was a force, a tangible reality. It wasn't the kind of love we experience here, where we mix it with conditions, doubts, and insecurities. No, this was the kind of love that created me, shaped me, and knew every hidden part of my soul. It was a love that made me feel complete for the first time in my existence. The love was fresh, constant, and endless. Each wave felt new, as if God's love could never be exhausted. It didn't just wash over me, it became a part of me, filling every corner of my being. And then the light began to open, revealing something even more astonishing, a vast, resplendent room filled with countless beings. Each one radiated its own light, shimmering like stars in a celestial sea. Yet, even among this magnificent crowd, there was one figure that stood out, brighter, more glorious, more complete. My soul knew who it was before my mind could even form the thought. It was Jesus. There was no doubt, no questioning. The connection I felt was deeper than recognition. It was as though my very existence had come from him. As I focused on him, I could feel his love, even before he spoke or looked my way. This wasn't an ordinary love, it was transformative, pulling me toward him like gravity, but with the tenderness of a parent calling their child home. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly at first, his presence was undeniable, magnetic, and filled with a warmth that dissolved every fear I'd ever known. "Jesus," I said, barely recognizing my own voice, "I want to see your face." In an instant, his face began to form before me. But something strange happened. I couldn't retain it. It was as if the very act of seeing him was too profound, too eternal, for my earthly mind to grasp. His features would come together, only to slip away from my memory as quickly as they appeared. Yet even as I forgot the details, the love in his eyes seared into my soul, deeper than words could express. He smiled, and in that smile, I saw a compassion that defied comprehension. He wasn't just a man. He was love personified. The light of his being radiated through every part of me, revealing all the hidden places of my life, both the good and the bad. Then came the life review. It wasn't a condemnation or a lecture. It was a conversation, deeply personal and filled with grace. We went through everything, every choice I'd made, every action I'd taken. There were moments I was proud of, and others I wished could be erased. What struck me most was how much he cared, not just about the major milestones of my life, but about the little things too. The times I'd shown kindness without thinking, or the moments I'd hurt someone and justified it with excuses. What broke me was seeing how my justifications affected him. He wasn't angry, but I could see the pain in his eyes when I tried to defend my selfishness or neglect. The excuses I had clung to for so long fell apart in his presence. Then he spoke. His words weren't just commands, they were truths that pierced my heart. "Brian," he said, "you need to pray more, not just routine prayers, but prayers that connect you to me. Your prayers should be as real as the love we share." He showed me how shallow my prayers had been, how often I'd gone through the motions without truly opening my heart. "Do good for others," he continued, "not because it's expected, but because it reflects my love in you. Be my hands and feet in the world." Finally, he said something that left me stunned: "Learn to suffer joyfully." Not because suffering is good, but because it shapes you into someone who can show my love to others. I didn't understand it at first. How could suffering ever be joyful? But he showed me that how I respond to pain has a ripple effect. If I let it make me bitter, it poisons the world around me. But if I face it with grace, trusting him even in the hardest times, it becomes a testimony to his love. Then came the final charge: share my love with everyone, not just those who agree with you or are easy to love. Show them the beauty and kindness I've shown you. Each word felt like a seed planted in my soul, ready to grow into something far greater than myself. And then, with a smile filled with infinite compassion, he told me it was time to return. "Brian," he said, "your work isn't finished." Before I could protest or beg to stay, the light began to fade. The next thing I remember was a sensation unlike anything I'd ever felt before. It was as though I was being pulled backward, away from the warmth, the light, and the overwhelming love of Jesus. The peace I had known so vividly began to slip away, replaced by the cold, sterile air of the hospital room. It wasn't abrupt or jarring, but I could feel the transition. The light faded, and the physical world came into focus. The beeping of monitors, the hurried voices of nurses, and the hum of machinery surrounded me. My chest felt heavy, as though a massive weight had settled on me, and my entire body ached as life rushed back into my limbs. I opened my eyes slowly, and the faces of the hospital staff came into view. Their expressions were a mix of relief and amazement. One of them leaned over me saying, "Brian, you're back. We thought we'd lost you." I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw and dry. I could barely whisper, but I managed to say, I saw him. I saw Jesus. Tears streamed down my face as the reality of what I'd just experienced hit me. The doctors later explained that I'd flatlined for several minutes. They had done everything they could to revive me, using a combination of CPR, defibrillation, and medication. By all accounts, I shouldn't have come back. My heart had been too damaged by the autoimmune disease, and my body was too weak. But here I was alive. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the ICU, the memory of my experience remained as vivid as the moment it happened. Every detail, every word Jesus spoke, stayed with me. I couldn't stop thinking about the love I'd felt, the kind of love that couldn't be explained or replicated on earth. But I also couldn't shake the responsibility I now carried. Jesus hadn't sent me back for no reason. His words echoed in my mind: pray deeply, do good for others, suffer joyfully, share my love. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. My health was still fragile, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I also knew that I wasn't alone. The love I'd experienced was still with me, a constant reminder of the connection I had to Jesus. As I lay in that hospital bed, I began to pray, not the rote, routine prayers I'd said in the past, but heartfelt, honest prayers. I thanked God for giving me another chance, for the lessons He'd taught me, and for the opportunity to live differently. When I was finally discharged, I returned home a changed man. My family noticed it immediately. I was more patient, more present, and more intentional about showing love. I started volunteering in my community, helping those in need. I began sharing my story with anyone who would listen, not to boast or draw attention to myself, but to point people toward Jesus. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still struggles, especially with my health. The heart transplant that followed was grueling, and there were days when the pain felt unbearable. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered what Jesus had said about suffering joyfully. I learned to see my hardships not as punishments, but as opportunities to reflect God's love to those around me. When I smiled through the pain or offered encouragement to someone else despite my own struggles, I felt closer to Him. And then there was the love. Sharing it wasn't always easy, especially with people who disagreed with me or challenged my faith. But I understood now that it wasn't my job to change hearts. That was God's work. My role was simply to plant seeds, to show the same kindness and compassion I had received. Looking back, I realized that dying wasn't the end of my journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to live with purpose, guided by the lessons I'd learned in the presence of Jesus. And now, as I share my story with you, I can only hope that it touches your heart the way it transformed mine. Life is fleeting, fragile, and unpredictable. But one thing is certain: the love of God is real, and it's available to every one of us. What will you do with the time you have left? Will you pray deeply, serve others, endure life's challenges with grace, and share His love? The choice is yours. If this story has moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your reflections on life after death, and how does this testimony resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories and enlightening discussions about the afterlife and faith. Together, let's explore the incredible hope and love that comes through Jesus Christ.